It started with a night no one could explain, a night that the town of Salem tried to erase, but failed, because what happened just hours before the trial of 9 accused women wasn't just strange, it was impossible. 9 women, locked away, guarded, accused of witchcraft, vanished without a single sound. No broken locks, no witnesses, no bodies ever found. And what the guards reported the next morning made even the most hardened men refuse to speak of it ever again. Before we go deeper into this chilling mystery, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Night Archive, because the story you're about to hear only gets darker. Salem, Massachusetts. The year is 1692. A small Puritan town, quiet on the surface, but beneath it, fear had already taken root. It didn't start with these 9 women. It started with whispers. Children began acting strangely, screaming, twisting their bodies, claiming invisible forces were attacking them. Doctors had no explanation, so the town reached the only conclusion they knew: witchcraft. At first, it seemed like a few isolated accusations, but then names started piling up. Neighbors accused neighbors. Friends accused friends. Even family turned on each other. And within weeks, Salem became a place where a single word could decide your fate. Which the 9 women at the center of this story were not random. Each one had already been accused, interrogated, and locked away. Some denied everything. Some broke under pressure. Some said things that made no sense, but were still believed. Because in Salem, truth didn't matter anymore. Fear did, and fear was spreading faster than anyone could control. These women were held in a small, heavily guarded jail awaiting trial. A trial that most people already believed would end in death. But the night before that trial, something changed. That evening, nothing seemed unusual. The guards did their rounds. The prisoners were inside their cells. Chains were secured. Everything was normal. But one of the guards later said something strange. He claimed the air inside the jail felt different, thicker. He said it felt like the walls themselves were listening. No one believed him at first, but then came midnight, and that's when the silence began. Not the normal silence of night, but a heavy, suffocating quiet. No wind outside, no creaking wood, no distant sounds, just nothing. One guard later admitted he felt an overwhelming urge to leave his post, not out of fear, but like something was pulling him away. Another said he heard faint whispers, but couldn't understand a single word. And then everything went black. Not darkness like night, but something deeper, like the light itself had been swallowed. No one could explain it. And by morning, the cells were empty. All 9 women gone. The doors were still locked. The chains were still in place. There were no signs of struggle. No footprints. No broken wood. No blood. Just emptiness. At first, the guards thought it was some kind of trick. Maybe they had been moved. Maybe someone had taken them for questioning. But when they checked with the magistrates, no one knew anything. Panic spread instantly, because this wasn't just an escape. It couldn't be. There was no way out. The jail had only one entrance, and it had been guarded all night. That's when they inspected the cells more closely, and what they found made things worse. Inside one of the cells, there were marks on the floor, not scratches from chains, not damage from tools, but strange, repeating patterns. 3 long lines, over and over again, as if something had been dragged or something had tried to come through. Another cell had something even more disturbing. The walls felt cold, unnaturally cold. One guard said when he touched it, he felt a sudden pain in his hand, like something burned him without heat. But the most chilling detail came from the chains. The chains that were supposed to hold the women in place were still locked, still secured, but empty, as if the women had simply slipped out of them. And that's when the rumors started. Some said the women were witches and had used dark powers to escape. Others believed something far worse, that something came for them, not to free them, but to take them. Because one guard, the same one who mentioned the whispers, finally spoke again. And what he described changed everything. He said just before the darkness, he saw something move near the far end of the corridor. Not a person, not an animal, something wrong. He couldn't describe its shape clearly, only that it didn't move like anything human. And it didn't walk. It stretched, like shadows pulling themselves across the ground. He said the whispers got louder, and then all at once they stopped. And in that moment of silence, he felt something brush past him. Cold, fast, and gone. When he woke up, the women were missing. No one wanted to believe him, because if what he said was true, then this wasn't an escape. This was something else entirely. And the town of Salem was no longer dealing with just fear. It was dealing with something it couldn't understand. But the strangest part of this story was still to come, because the women didn't just vanish. They left something behind, something no one could explain. And once people noticed it, they realized this incident was far from over. By the time the sun fully rose over Salem, the news had already spread. 9 accused women gone without a trace. At first, people refused to believe it, because disappearances like this didn't happen. Not in a place where fear already ruled everything. But when the officials confirmed it, the reaction wasn't relief. It was something far worse. Because if the accused witches had escaped, then they were still out there. And if they hadn't escaped, then something else was. The jail was sealed immediately. No one was allowed inside except a small group of officials and guards. They needed answers, fast. But the deeper they looked, the more confusing everything became. One of the magistrates ordered a full inspection of every inch of the building: walls, floors, doors, locks, everything. And yet nothing made sense. The locks were untouched, no signs of tampering. The keys hadn't been used, and the guards all swore the same thing. No one entered, no one left. It was impossible. But then they found something new, something they had missed earlier. In the corner of one of the cells, there was a faint smell, not strong enough to notice at first, but once you focused on it, it was unmistakable. Burnt wood. But there had been no fire, no smoke, no damage to the walls or floor, just the smell. And it wasn't coming from the cell itself. It was coming from the air, as if something had been there and left behind a trace. One of the older guards refused to go back inside after that. He claimed he recognized the smell, said he had only smelled it once before years ago, after a storm that struck a nearby farm. He said the livestock had been found dead. No wounds, no signs of attack, just lifeless. And the same smell filled the air that day. Most people dismissed his story, but not everyone, because something else started happening. Outside the jail, animals began acting strange. Dogs refused to go near the building. They would bark, growl, then suddenly go silent. Horses would panic for no reason. Some even refused to move at all, as if something invisible stood in their way. And then the crows appeared. Not one or two, dozens, perched on rooftops, fences, trees, watching, always watching. People tried to chase them away, but they wouldn't leave. They just shifted and stared. And then came the next discovery: a piece of cloth found just outside the jail. It belonged to one of the missing women. Torn, dirty, but there was something wrong with it. It was damp, as if it had been soaked in water. But there was no rain that night, and no source of water nearby. When they touched it, it felt colder than it should have been. Unnaturally cold, almost like ice, but it wasn't frozen. And that's when fear began to change. Before, people feared witches. Now they weren't so sure, because this didn't feel like witchcraft anymore. It felt like something else, something older, something no one had words for. That evening, a small group of men decided to search the surrounding area. They couldn't just wait. If the women had escaped, they had to be found. And if something had taken them, they needed to know what it was. They moved carefully through the woods, following no clear path, just instinct and unease. At first, there was nothing, just trees, dirt, silence. But then one of them noticed something on the ground: marks, not footprints, not animal tracks, but long, dragged lines, 3 of them, running parallel, the same pattern that had been found inside the cell. The men followed the marks deeper into the forest, and as they did, the air changed, colder, heavier, like the forest itself was holding its breath. One man said he felt dizzy. Another said he heard something behind them, but when they turned, there was nothing. They kept going, because turning back somehow felt worse. And then they found it, a clearing, completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing, just stillness. And in the center of that clearing, there was something that made all of them stop. 9 shapes, lying on the ground. At first, they thought they had found the women, but as they got closer, they realized they were wrong. These weren't bodies. They were impressions, like something had pressed into the earth, leaving behind outlines. Human-shaped, but not quite right. Too long, too stretched, and the ground around them was damp, just like the cloth. One of the men knelt down slowly. He reached out, touched the soil, and instantly pulled his hand back. His face went pale, because the ground was freezing cold. Not just cold from the night air, but deeply, unnaturally cold, like something had drained the warmth out of it. That's when they heard it. A sound, faint at first, like wind. But there was no wind. It grew louder. Not loud enough to be clear, but enough to feel. A whispering all around them. The men looked at each other. No one spoke, because they all heard it. And then one of them turned toward the trees, slowly, carefully, and his expression changed. He didn't scream. He didn't move. He just stared. The others followed his gaze. And what they saw, none of them would ever describe the same way again. Some said it was a figure. Others said it was a shape. One man later claimed it had no form at all, just movement, dark shifting movement between the trees, watching them, waiting. And then it was gone, just like that. The whispers stopped. The air shifted, and everything felt normal again. But nothing was normal, because when the men returned to Salem that night, they weren't the same. They spoke less, avoided questions, and one of them refused to speak at all. But the story didn't stay contained, because something followed them back. Not something they could see, but something they could feel. And over the next few days, Salem would begin to change. In ways no one expected. Because whatever took those 9 women wasn't finished yet. By the 3rd day, Salem no longer felt like the same town. People didn't say it out loud, but everyone felt it. Something had shifted. The fear that once pointed outward toward accused witches had turned inward. Now, people were afraid of something they couldn't see and couldn't understand. The men who had gone into the forest were watched closely, not by officials, but by everyone, because they were the last ones to go near whatever had taken the women, and something about them felt wrong. One of them stopped sleeping entirely. Neighbors said they saw him standing outside his home at night, staring into the distance, not moving for hours. Another began speaking in fragments, short, broken sentences, repeating the same words over and over. Not gone, not gone. But the most disturbing change came from the 3rd man. the one who had seen something first. He seemed normal at first, calm, quiet, too quiet, until one evening he finally spoke, not to a group, not to the magistrates, but to his own wife. He told her something that she would later repeat word for word, before refusing to speak of it again. He said, "They weren't taken away." He paused. "They were opened." No one understood what that meant, not at first, but then things began to happen. Small things, easy to ignore, at least in the beginning. Doors left slightly open when they had been shut. Objects moved just enough to notice. Footsteps heard when no one was there. People tried to explain it, tried to blame each other, but deep down they knew this wasn't normal. And then the dreams started. It didn't happen to everyone, but enough people experienced it that it couldn't be dismissed. They described the same thing: a dark space, endless, cold, and something moving within it, not attacking, not chasing, just watching, waiting. One woman said she heard voices in her dream, soft, distant, calling her name. Another claimed she saw the 9 missing women standing together. But something about them was wrong. Their bodies stretched, their faces unclear, like they weren't fully there. And when she tried to speak to them, they didn't respond. They just stared. And then they began to move, not walking, but pulling, like something unseen was guiding them. And just before she woke up, she heard one clear sentence: "They are not finished." When she woke, she refused to leave her house. Word spread quickly, and fear followed, because this wasn't one person imagining things. It was happening to multiple people. Different homes, different parts of town, the same dream, the same feeling, the same message. Something wasn't finished. That's when the magistrates stepped in again. They needed control. They needed to restore order, because Salem was slipping. So they made a decision. They declared the disappearances an act of witchcraft. They said the women had used dark powers to escape, and anyone who claimed otherwise would be questioned, silenced if necessary, because admitting the truth was too dangerous. But the truth didn't stay hidden, because more evidence began to surface. And this time, it wasn't inside the jail. It was inside people's homes. One family reported finding strange marks on their wooden floor. 3 lines, long, deep, just like the ones in the cell. Another family found their walls cold to the touch, not just cool, but freezing, even in the warmth of the day. And then a child went missing, only for a few hours, but long enough to cause panic. When they found him, he was sitting alone near the edge of the forest, silent, unmoving. When his mother tried to speak to him, he didn't respond. He just looked at her and whispered something that made her scream. He said they were calling him. That was enough. The town was no longer just afraid. It was breaking. People stopped going out at night. Doors were locked earlier. Candles burned longer, and still it didn't help, because whatever had started in that jail was no longer contained. It had spread. And then came the final sign, the one thing no one could ignore. It happened just before dawn. A group of people, awake from restless sleep, stepped outside their homes, drawn by something they couldn't explain. And when they looked toward the forest, they saw it. A faint, unnatural glow. Not bright, not like fire, but soft, shifting, moving between the trees, slowly, almost deliberately. No one spoke. No one moved. They just watched. Because deep down they already knew. Whatever had taken those 9 women was still out there. And it was closer than ever. But the most terrifying part was what happened next. Because someone decided to follow that light. And what they discovered would finally reveal the truth. A truth Salem was never meant to understand. No one knows who moved first. Some said it was a man desperate for answers. Others believed it was someone already losing their mind. But one figure stepped forward, slowly, carefully, toward the edge of the forest, and then into it. At first, no one followed. They just stood there watching the darkness swallow him whole. But fear, mixed with curiosity, is a powerful thing. And eventually, a few others followed behind, keeping their distance, not close enough to help, but not far enough to turn back. The glow ahead flickered between the trees, soft, unnatural, almost like it was guiding them. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became. No leaves rustling, no branches breaking, no night sounds at all, just that faint light, and the feeling that something was aware of them, watching every step, waiting. The man in front didn't stop, didn't hesitate, like he already knew where he was going, or something was leading him. Then suddenly the trees opened, the same clearing, the same place the men had found before. But this time, it was different. The ground wasn't empty anymore. The 9 impressions were still there, but now something stood above them. Shapes, tall, still. At first, they looked like people. But as the group moved closer, that illusion broke. Their bodies were wrong. Too thin, too long. Like something had stretched them beyond what was natural. Their heads tilted slowly, as if noticing the newcomers. And then one of them moved. Not a step, not a gesture, but a shift, like its form struggled to stay together. And that's when someone whispered, "That's them." No one wanted to believe it, but they all felt it. Those shapes were the 9 women, or at least what was left of them. The man at the front stepped closer, too close, his breathing heavy, his eyes locked on the figures. And then he spoke, calling one of their names. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, one of the shapes reacted. Its head turned unnaturally fast. Its body twisted, trying to face him. And in that moment, they saw its face, or something that used to be one. distorted, fading, like it couldn't fully exist. And then it opened its mouth. But the voice that came out wasn't human. It was layered. Multiple voices, overlapping, broken. "We are not gone," the group froze. No one moved. No one breathed. And then it continued. "We were opened," the same words. The same phrase the man in Salem had spoken. But now, it meant something far worse. Because as the figure spoke, the others began to move. Slow, unnatural, pulling themselves forward, like they were being dragged by something unseen. And then the ground beneath them shifted. The earth cracked, not violently, but slowly, quietly, like something beneath it was waking up. And from those cracks, darkness began to rise. Not shadows, not smoke, something thicker, something that moved with purpose. It wrapped around the figures, through them, as if they weren't separate anymore, as if they had become part of it. The whispers returned, louder now, clearer, but still impossible to understand. And then all at once, the figures stopped moving. Frozen, still, silent. The light faded, the whispers cut off, and everything went still again. The group stood there, unable to move, because they all felt it. Something had changed. Something had noticed them. And then one of the men screamed, not from what he saw, but from what he felt, because something had brushed past him. Cold, fast, exactly like the guard had described. And that was enough. The group broke, running, tripping, desperate to escape the forest. No one looked back. No one spoke until they reached the edge of town. And even then, no one wanted to explain what they had seen. Because how could they? How do you describe something that shouldn't exist? By morning, the story had already begun to change. People claimed it was hysteria, fear, imagination. The magistrates dismissed it completely, declared it lies, because accepting the truth would mean admitting something far worse than witchcraft existed. So they buried it, silenced it, erased it. The official record of Salem never mentioned 9 women vanishing that night, never mentioned the clearing, never mentioned the shapes. But the people who saw it never forgot. And over time, they stopped talking about it. Not because they wanted to, but because something about that night felt unfinished, like speaking about it might bring it back. Years passed. Salem changed. The trials ended. The fear slowly faded, at least on the surface. But the forest never returned to normal. Animals avoided it. People stayed away. And sometimes, on quiet nights, a faint glow could still be seen between the trees, moving, waiting, as if whatever opened that night never truly closed. And those 9 women were never meant to escape, because they didn't leave. They became something else, something tied to that place, something that doesn't fade with time. So the next time you hear about Salem and the witch trials, remember this. The most terrifying part of that history isn't what was recorded, it's what was hidden. Because some things aren't forgotten, they're sealed away. And sometimes they don't stay sealed forever. If this story made you think or gave you chills, drop a comment below and tell me what you believe really happened that night. And if you want more dark, hidden stories like this, don't forget to share this video and subscribe to Night Archive, because some stories are still waiting to be uncovered.